Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. I'm Aya Soma, and I'm here with Bhante Sudasu. And tonight we will be discussing, once again, dependent origination. So that we will be reading from a sutta and having a bit of discussion between Bhante Sudasu and myself, and with you as well. So you're always welcome to type in any questions or comments as we go through the sutta, and we will address them as we go. But before we get into all of this, we can start with some guided meditation. So I'll invite Bhante Sudasu to please guide us in meditation, Bhante.
Okay. So start by getting into meditation posture. So taking a few moments to settle into your seat. So always starting with adjusting your body very carefully so you can sit upright with a certain amount of comfort and ease. Making sure that your pelvis is tilted slightly forward so that your spine can be fully upright. Shoulders are swept back so that your chest is open. Chin tilted very slightly forward, about 5 degrees forward, just enough so that the throat opens up completely, so that the breath flows very smoothly and naturally down your throat and into your lungs. Your hands resting together lightly in your lap. Just take a few moments of deep breathing, just appreciating sitting still, appreciating stillness of body and mind. It's such a relief to put down all the burden of activity. Such a relief to not need to move the body or the mind. Such a relief to be able to do nothing, think nothing, remember nothing. So feeling the joy swelling up within you, just from appreciating the stillness and clarity of doing nothing right here in the present moment. And the more attention we pay, the more much enjoyment we have of this moment. You can feel a slight smile growing on your lips as you immerse the mind in the bliss of present moment, contented awareness. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. No need for memory. You can forget everything. No need for planning. The future will take care of itself. All there is to do is just to enjoy awareness of the present moment. Trying to feel your body with full clarity. It's bright, radiant, comforting, pleasurable experience. Arising in the body due to stillness and attention. If thoughts drift through the mind, take no interest in them. It's just like mist, like fog, passing phantasm. Nothing important, nothing to resist, nothing to hold on to. You just let the mist pass through the mind without taking any interest. Just staying completely focused on full awareness of the body, complete enjoyment of this body, saturated with still attention. letting body and mind unify into euphoric, attentive stillness. Slowly and gently release your posture, moving your arms and legs a little bit, shifting side to side a little bit, gently rotating your head, rolling your shoulders back and forth, twisting side to side a little bit. You can release your legs if you're sitting cross-legged, switching to a more comfortable position. Massage a little bit if you need to. And take a moment just to appreciate the peacefulness of the mind. Enjoying the inner silence. You can join your hands in Anjali in appreciation to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So at this time, I'll pass things back over to Ayasoma, who will be leading this evening's discussion. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Bhante, for guiding us in meditation, and thank you all for joining us as well. Hello to Gita, Roy, Kumu, Anita, Jorgel, Michael, Jayanta, and Sunia. Welcome, friends, as well as everyone else who's watching and hasn't checked in yet. So tonight, I was thinking that we could read this wonderful sutta together, and I'll post it in the comments. And Bhante Sudhasu and I will read from the sutta and discuss it as we go. And you're welcome to type in the comments any comments that you might have, as well as any questions that arise along the way, and we'll try our best to address it as we keep going. All right, so we can start by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So the sutta is Samyutta Nikaya 1261, the Asuttava Sutta, uninstructed. And it begins, thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove on Attapindika's Park. And he gives these teachings to the bhikkhus. Bhikkhus, the uninstructed worldling might experience revulsion towards his body composed of the four great elements. He might become dispassionate towards it and be liberated from it. For what reason? Because growth and decline is seen in this body composed of the four great elements. It is seen being taken up and laid aside. Therefore, the uninstructed worldling might experience revulsion towards this body composed of the four great elements. He might become dispassionate towards it and be liberated from it. So, Bhante, maybe you can share some words on this first paragraph.
Yeah, well, first off, the word revulsion in Pali is nibbida, which is more commonly translated as disenchantment. And in Bhikkhu Bodhi's other translations, that's how he normally translates this word. So nibbida, he normally renders as disenchantment. I asked him once why he used the word revulsion in the Samyutta Nikaya, and he said because the word revulsion literally means turning away from. So he clarified that the word revulsion here is not meant to carry the meaning of disgust, but rather the sense of losing interest in something. So it's not saying you should be disgusted by your body, but rather that we should be uninterested. So not being so obsessed with it, not being enchanted by our body. So the word nibbida, its literal meaning is to stop searching. So to stop seeking, stop looking, stop trying to find. So we stop trying to find true happiness in our body. So this is disenchantment. When we recognize that our body is not a source of true happiness, then naturally we experience disenchantment towards it. And so the Buddha is pointing out here, he's saying how even somebody who's not an advanced practitioner, maybe somebody who's not even Buddhist at all, they can still recognize that bodies are subject to growth and decline. You can see how the body starts off as a weak little baby, and slowly over many years, it gets bigger and stronger and smarter, and it reaches a peak. For most people, it's usually somewhere in their 20s or 30s, the body reaches its peak. And then after that, it starts declining. So the body goes into decay, the onset of decrepitude. And if you experience sickness or some kind of affliction, then you might experience decay and decrepitude even younger than that. Because this process of growth and decline can be seen in the body, then even someone who's not an advanced Buddhist practitioner might start to lose interest in the body. They might recognize that the body is not a reliable source of happiness and satisfaction. And similarly, the phrase being taken up and laid aside is referring to birth and death. So taking up the body means one is born, and laying aside the body means that when we die, the body is set aside. It becomes a useless piece of dead meat. So similarly, if one contemplates birth and death of the body, then one might recognize that the body is not reliable. It's not a place that we can make our home. It's just a temporary experience. So he's saying even somebody who doesn't have much wisdom or much understanding might still recognize that the body is not a safe place to put your self-identity, to base your happiness upon. Ayasoma, any other thoughts?
Thank you, Bante. Yeah, that's very exhaustive, how do you say? But perhaps I'll also add a reflection in terms of also our personal practice. So usually when we start meditating, we do a lot of mindfulness of the body. So for the first time, maybe we enter Buddhist practice without any kind of even sort of realization that we have a body, or better, we have an intellectual understanding that we have the body, and we have an experiential understanding that we have the body when the body doesn't feel that great or when it feels great. But most of the time, when it's actually neither here nor there, we are completely, kind of forgetting that the body is even there, and we're very much caught up in our heads. So one of the first experiences that we start having in meditation practice is actually learning what this body is, right? So we start, like feeling the sensations of the hands on, if you're wearing a robe, on the robe, so on a piece of cloth, for example. Or if we do meditation practices like the 4 elements meditations that actually Bhante Sudaso teaches on a regular basis, and he was the first monk who taught me the 4 elements meditations, and very, very helpful to actually get in tune with all these different sort of layers of the body. So the solidity of the body, so the earth element, then the water element, so all the, mostly our bodies are made of water, yet we perceive them as quite the opposite. We kind of have more of a sense that they are made of earth, mostly made of earth rather than mostly made of water. But we start feeling, the sweat on our back, and the saliva and all the different the tears, the blood. Actually, we start really actually for the first time like sensing also the pulsating blood in our body if we really put our mind to it. And of course, the air element, mindfulness of breathing, is a bestseller in Buddhism. So we get in tune with the breath, something that probably we've never actually even done, ever, if we're not born in a Buddhist country and we're not born, with any type of practice that invites us to pay attention to the breath. And then, of course, the fire element, so the heat and cold that we're experiencing in the body. So all of these practices actually get us in tune with the experience that we have of the body, and we can actually start seeing the impermanence of it. We start reflecting more about it, both intellectually and experientially. We start paying attention to how we're constantly shedding pieces, bits and pieces everywhere. All the before maybe we would sweep the floor and just perceive it as dust, and now we're like, oh, that dust is actually a lot of my skin, a lot of my hair, a lot of who I thought it was, me, a while back. But now I'm actually reflecting and contemplating and doing all these incredible insight practices that do in fact produce a certain degree of wisdom. And so we can get to sort of point where we're like, actually, I'm doing quite great with this Buddhism thing, I'm very close to stream entry. Yeah, I can see how this body is not who I am. This is not me. This is not mine. This is not myself. So we also start having a different relationship with pain. That is one of the most noticeable things that happens during meditation practice, right? At the very beginning, we start and like 5 minutes feels like 5 hours, and everything, every part of the body seems like, they're torturing us with medieval machines. And, and yeah, we have that really horrible physical experience. But then after a while, we start enduring more and more and more, and we can actually sit still for long periods of time. And we start seeing how, this bodily pain is not me, not mine. Well, it's like a lot of progress there. So it's very interesting, This is, I think, also what the Buddha is saying. He's like, yeah, we can become dispassionate, revolt, turn away from it, not being too obsessed with our wrinkles, too obsessed with our the body has to appear in one shape or form, or we have a different kind of relationship with it. So what comes to mind, and the Sutta continues. But bhikkhus, so where the fun part comes, as to which is called mind and mentality and consciousness, the uninstructed worldling is unable to experience revulsion towards it, unable to become dispassionate towards it, and be liberated from it. For what reason? Because for a long time this has been held to by him, appropriated, and grasped thus. This is mine, this I am, this is myself. Therefore, the uninstructed worldling is unable to experience revulsion towards it, unable to become dispassionate towards it, and be liberated from it.
Yeah, so this is a very common experience. So, for example, thinking of people who they're getting old and their body's starting to become decrepit, starting to decay, or maybe they get sick and their body isn't functioning the way they want it to. Or maybe somebody who's been chronically ill their whole life, or chronically unhealthy their whole life. And so for these various reasons, they're not so interested in their body. So then the natural tendency is to take refuge in our mind, to think, well, I'm not my body, but I am my mind. I am my thoughts. I am my perspectives. I am my ideas. I am my beliefs. I am my opinions. I am my preferences. So we might start to recognize that our body is not a reliable basis of happiness. We might even start to recognize that our body is not a suitable foundation for self-identity. So then naturally we take refuge in the mind. We think, well, I am that mind which is inhabiting this body. I am that mind which is capable of such profound thoughts and ideas. I am that mind which is capable of a sublime bliss beyond bodily pleasure. I am that mind which can appreciate such refined mental ideas and imagery. Or I am that mind which can generate such beautiful daydreams and imaginings. So we tend to identify as the mind. And this is because, again, we think there's only two things. There's the body and there's the mind. If we're not the body, well, then that must mean we're the mind. It seems like that's the only remaining option. And also the mind seems more reliable. The body is this unreliable, decaying chunk of meat that we can give it coarse, clumsy commands, but it's not particularly easy to control. I can't just tell my body to get taller and stronger and healthier. But the mind seems so much easier to wield, seems much easier to control. So then it's natural to think, well, if I have more control over my mind, that must be who I really am. This must be my true self. So because we have this strong self-identity with the mind, then it's very difficult for us to have any kind of disenchantment or dispassion towards the mind.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante. Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. Also, the relationship that we have the body. If the body stops working, as we want it to work. So if our arms break or we get into an accident, a physical accident, so we wouldn't wait a second to go to the doctor, to the hospital, and get it fixed, etc. We wouldn't be there. Telling our body to fix itself, right? We wouldn't go like, oh, fix yourself leg or fix yourself arm. So there's already this understanding that it is this not terribly different than a bag that we carry around, and that if it breaks, not just by wanting for it to fix, that it will sew itself magically, but we actually have to put thread and needle or bring it to someone, to a tailor, and someone who is competent and puts the things together in order to have the body again. But when it comes to anything that has to do with the mind, don't we feel that attached? As soon as we feel a bit of anxiety, we tell ourselves, stop feeling anxious or stop feeling this and that, because we actually think that we have that control over it. How many times does it work actually when we're feeling anxiety and we tell ourselves to stop feeling anxious? I think it has historically a 0% success rate worldwide.
Possibly a negative success rate.
You're right. Yeah.
It's like, stop being anxious. I must stop being anxious.
Yeah.
It can actually make you even more anxious.
Yeah, minus 100% success rate. You start with a bit of anxiety and then you're full-blown agitation. So yeah, I think this is also what the Buddha is addressing here, that anything that has to do with the non-material sphere is something that we actually feel very much that it belongs to us, that it's our possession, and that is very often who we are. So, perhaps it's our nationality as well, or as Bhante was mentioning, our attitudes of mind. If we're a creative person, we feel like that is who I am. Or if we are a more scientific person, then that's who we are. Or if we're an older person, then we feel like we're automatically wise. Or if we're a young person, we feel like we're automatically silly perhaps, or immature, or whatever it is. So there are all these kind of immaterial qualities that we truly think that is, that belongs to us. That's who we are. And the Buddha continues by saying, it would be better, because for the uninstructed worldling to take as self this body composed of the four great elements rather than the mind. For what reason? Because this body composed of the 4 great elements is seen standing for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3, for 4, 5, or 10 years, for 20, 30, 40, or 50 years, for 100 years, or even longer. But that which is called mind and mentality and consciousness arises as one thing and ceases as another by day and by night. Just as a monkey roaming through the forest grabs hold of one branch, lets that go and grabs another, then lets that go and grabs still another, so too that which is called mind and mentality and consciousness arises as one thing and ceases as another by day and by night. This is possibly one of my favorite. I know we say it all the time, but it's seriously one of actually the most transformative passages in the Pali Canon that I read that made such an impact in my mind, in my practice. I had instant Dhammasukha, but also it spoke instantly to my experience of the world. And in that moment, it definitely propelled me towards taking ordination, actually, to going forth. Not awakening yet, but but at least taking, like, trying my best to pursue this path. And we see, as we were saying earlier, how like, once again, we think that we can actually have an experiential understanding that the body is not exactly who we are, but we get attached to all these non-material things, when actually the material things are a lot more reliable, are a lot more long-standing than the ones that we attach to. So we kind of have everything backwards. So I loved it, because this is what I call, one of the compassionate slaps in the faces that the Buddha gives us, in the suttas, where he's like, you think you're you have accomplished a lot in this practice. Actually, you're a fool. And you're a fool because you can't see, you can't perceive the impermanence of your thoughts. You can't perceive the impermanence of your identities. For example, actually, we were talking about nationality. As someone who was born and bred in Italy, and then traveled quite a bit as an adult, also a little bit actually when I was a child as well, in different countries, then I still think of myself as an Italian person. But last time I was in Italy, actually, I was having this really bizarre experience of being this kind of foreigner who knew the language fluently and understood exactly why people were saying certain things or acting in a certain way, but I wasn't really quite Italian like everyone else, right? And so this thing that was so solid in my mind, in that moment, actually, I saw how impermanent it was, how sort of immaterial it was. It was more of a concept, an idea that I had attached to, but it actually had less and less sort of real meaning in my experience of the world. And I think this is also what the Buddha is pointing at. That actually this body has lasted longer than I've actually been Italian, if I've ever been Italian, So it's very interesting.
And also this sutta is the source of the famous concept of monkey mind. So this is one piece of the sutta which is actually very well known. Many people don't know where this idea comes from. They don't know it's from this particular sutta, and they're not aware of the other important ideas in the sutta. But they are aware of the simile the Buddha uses, of like a monkey swinging through the forest trees, swinging from branch to branch. So just as the monkey keeps grabbing one branch and grabbing another and grabbing another, in the same way, our mind is constantly grabbing one object after another. It's constantly grabbing this thought and this image and this memory and this idea and this sensation and this perception. The mind is constantly grabbing one thing after another. So when we stop and pay attention to the mind, we recognize that except in deep states of concentration, so except during deep meditation, the mind is always moving, whether moving a lot or moving slightly, the mind is in this constant state of agitation and disturbance and motion. And this is what becomes really clear, again, during meditation practice. We see how the mind just keeps grabbing one thing after another without seeming to hold still. So in our meditation practice, often we can just watch that. Watch it with the kind of bemused detachment that you might watch a monkey swinging through the forest, but not taking it seriously. And in so doing, then we find that there is a stillness to be found. And the stillness is in observing the motion of the mind without being swept along by it, without being caught up in it. But this is not what the uninstructed worldling is doing. The uninstructed worldling is going along for the ride. The uninstructed worldling is right there with the monkey swinging from branch to branch, constantly trying to grab at one interesting thought, one interesting image, one interesting idea after another. And in so doing, there's this constant internal unsettlement, this constant sense of being disturbed and distracted, and a lack of peacefulness internally, and this constant derangement of mind that comes through an inability to have perspective on the movements of mind. So trying to place our sense of self in our mind, when our mind doesn't hold still for even an instant. Every moment it's a different experience arising. So we're trying to, it's like the old story of trying to build a house on quicksand. There's no solid foundation that you can make. Wherever you try to put a foundation, it just slips out from under you. So that's what it's like when we're trying to put our self-identity in the mind. Wherever you try to anchor your self-identity, it just slips away immediately. But we keep trying anyway, because we're so deeply stuck on our belief that we must have a solid self-identity that we seem to be willfully blind to the fact that there's absolutely no solid ground that we can build a self-identity on, either in the body or the mind.
Thank you, Bante. And the Buddha continues by saying, therein, because the instructed noble disciple attends closely and carefully to dependent origination itself thus. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. That is, with ignorance as condition, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as condition, consciousness, and so forth, all the links of dependent origination. Such is the the origin of this whole mass of suffering. But with the remainderless. I'm from Italy, so English is not my first language. With the remainderless, fading away and cessation of ignorance comes cessation of volitional formations, and so forth, all the way to the end of the links. So here we get to actually what we've been talking about for the entire past 2 weeks, really, on this channel. So dependent origination, and we will be talking about it for the next 2 weeks as well. So Usajant Punadamo will be joining us next week, starting a series on a weekly series every Wednesday on the links of dependent origination. And sometimes we can get too philosophical, too intellectual about dependent origination and kind of lose the sort of point of all of this. What is the purpose of the teachings of the Buddha? What is the purpose of Paticca Samuppada? Why did the Buddha teach that to us? And it can be some kind of intellectual exercise that we do that sometimes, we want to impress our other Buddhist friends or perhaps just our friends in general. Usually it doesn't work that that well to impress people who are not Buddhist with dependent origination actually kind of causes sudden drop of like friendship. So everybody's like, okay, whatever, what is this sort of philosophy? I'd rather have a beer or something. That's a lot more fun.
You go up to your atheist friend and say, with consciousness as condition, mind and body comes to be. And they're just like, wait, what?
Yeah, exactly. Very crazy. But in essence, instead of like thinking or approaching dependent origination as an abstract philosophical concept, we can actually see, and I think here the Buddha is inviting us to really look at it experientially and looking closely and carefully, as he says, when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. This is in essence, basically, just this is dependent origination without having to go through all the links. But this is what we can keep for ourselves and see, analyze reality every single moment of our day. We can actually see when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, this ceases. And in this way, by really analyzing our experience this way, we can start creating conditions that create the results that we want, rather than being surprised by these random results that we get and keeping on putting random conditions in place that then produce these hit and miss results. And, since it's hit and miss result, when it's good results, we're like, okay, this is great. But when it's bad results, then we get really, really upset. There's a lot of suffering and we're puzzled and confused and a lot of despair, agitation, suffering. And we do it on repeat over and over again, over and over again. So what we want to do is break the cycle fundamentally. And the Buddha empowers us to do that by looking at cause and consequences and at interdependence of all these causes and consequences. So then we're not passive anymore in our experience of life, but rather we're empowered once again. We're the boss, as Venerable Robina Courtine says. I love that. We're the boss. We're in control. We're like, okay, I want peace. I want relaxation. I want anxiety to go away. Well, these are the conditions that I need to put into being. So then those results come there. We don't just go and, outside and start yelling at at the lawn if we wanted roses, right? We're like, oh, why is there all this lawn here? I just wish there were roses right now. We understand that we didn't put the conditions in place for roses to be there. We didn't get the soil, we didn't get the roses, we didn't plant them, we didn't water them, we didn't do any of all of that. So we put the conditions for grass to be there, or someone else did it, in the past. So those are the results. We're not doing anything. So if we want roses, well, we study how to grow roses and we create the conditions for roses to appear. So it's no different. If we don't want anxiety, well, right now we've got anxiety. That means that we already created the conditions in the past. So what we're seeing, anxiety, is the result. So we don't take ownership of the anxiety. We just take ownership of the creating causes and conditions. Actually, we don't even need to take ownership. We just do it. We're like, okay, we understand this. And we roll up our sleeves and do the teachings of the Buddha and create conditions for anxiety not to be there in the first place. And Bhante, maybe you have other thoughts to share on this?
That's actually a pretty thorough explanation. I can't really think of anything I would add to it.
All right.
Except just emphasizing again that this statement in the suttas elsewhere, this statement is called idappaccayata, which means conditionality or a specific conditionality. So when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. In Pali, this is extremely short, by the way. It sounds a bit awkward in English, but in Pali, it's extremely short. It's just a few words and very punchy. So it's bringing forward two critical concepts of Buddhism. One, everything is impermanent, so everything is temporary. And two, everything is causal. In other words, nothing lasts, but nothing is random. Everything happens based upon cause and effect. So whatever experience we're currently having, there's no need to be distressed by it because we know that it's temporary. And we also know that if we just put in the causes of good conditions, then we'll get good results in the future. So by reflecting on this one sentence here, this sentence of conditionality, specific conditionality, then that's the conditions for equanimity in the face of any kind of adversity or trouble or difficulty. No matter what kind of difficult situation we're having, we can just reflect, well, this is temporary. Whatever is happening is temporary. And if I do wholesome things, then this will not happen again to me in the future. Or it will happen only a limited number of times before the old karma is worn out. So I think that's all I have to add to your excellent exposition on this paragraph.
Oh, thank you, Bhante. High praise. The Buddha then finishes this sutta by saying, seeing thus, because the instructed noble disciple experiences revulsion towards form, revulsion towards feeling, revulsion towards perception, revulsion towards volitional formations, revulsion towards consciousness, experiencing revulsion, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it's liberated. He understands, destroyed his birth, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done. There is no more for the state of being. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yeah, so this is pointing out to the fact that when we contemplate the temporary and conditional nature of our body and mind, then we naturally become disenchanted with both body and mind. So form is body, and the other four, feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness, are mind. So when we recognize that everything within body and mind is a temporary experience that arises based upon specific conditions, then we recognize that nothing here is a solid foundation for self-identity. Neither body nor mind is a solid basis for self-identity, and none of it contains true happiness. So through that recognition, then naturally we become disenchanted. We lose our interest in trying to find happiness and self-identity where it can't be found. And therefore, we become dispassionate. We lose our infatuation with body and mind. And the Buddha says that dispassion liberates. So in Pali, it's two simple words, viraga vimucchati. Dispassion liberates. So dispassion frees the mind from all greed, hatred, and delusion. So ultimately, Buddhist practice is all about cultivating dispassion, because through dispassion, one experiences liberation. And it's important to be clear, though, that dispassion does not mean apathy. So dispassion is a product of wisdom. It's a product of clearly understanding the nature of reality. And in order to clearly understand the nature of reality, you need to pay attention to it. And in order to pay attention to something, you cannot be apathetic. Apathy means you have no interest in paying attention. Apathy means you don't want to pay attention. In fact, apathy means you want to ignore things. And ignoring is the exact opposite of wisdom. So it's very important to clarify, when we talk about dispassion, what we mean is non-attachment. We mean non-obsession, not being obsessed with or attached to or not expecting anything in particular, not demanding anything from reality. But at the same time, paying full attention to each moment, giving the proper wise attention to to each moment of experience, recognizing the impermanent and causal nature of each phenomenon that appears before the mind, and of the mind itself as well. Recognizing that there's no place anywhere that we can identify as me or mine. So in this way, then, one can attain full awakening. One can attain full enlightenment.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bante. Yes, I will just add to that, that in essence, basically this last paragraph, we can understand also experientially what the Buddha, actually, what the Buddha, but like what we always hear perhaps in Dhamma talks, like the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, what the hell is the 5 aggregates subject to clinging? And then, I was learning the aggregates, and it just becomes these intellectual kind of things. But I was like, okay, so how are we clinging to the aggregates? But as Bante explained very clearly how it maps out very well with mentality and materiality, and how this process of attachment comes into being, then I think we have a more experiential understanding once again of what is the 5 aggregates subject to clinging all about. So I think that's all perhaps for discussion, unless you have any other thoughts.
No, I think we can go to questions at this time.
Right. Okay. And well, good to see you, Smiley Lane. And Geeta, you're very kind with your messages. We're grateful also to see you all the times online. We wouldn't be here if there weren't people who were tuning in. And Kumu says that is so true. Experientially, asking the mind to stop anxiety makes it worse. Yeah, it's a universal sort of fact. It's the 4th characteristic, if there could be such a thing. And welcome to Jess and Jessica and Diana. Good to see you, friend. Hello to Putrika as well, and Victor, good friends. So there's no questions nor comments as of now. But maybe we'll give you a few more moments to type them in. Yeah, as mentioned, this sutta made such an impact in my practice. I still remember like it was yesterday, the first time I read it. And wow. Yeah, it's just incredible how the Buddha manages to capture and describe our experience of reality with such wisdom and such. He's not even like physically present, right? There's not the materiality of the Buddha in front of me, except in the statue. Yet it's like you can see also experientially when you hear the Dhamma, when you see the Dhamma, you see the Buddha. The Buddha is present there with you.
Yeah, and this is because the Dhamma that the Buddha is teaching, he's talking about universal truths. So he doesn't need to be in our presence because our mind is not different from the mind of anybody else's. So we tend to believe that we're such special, unique beings, but actually we're exactly the same as everybody else. So the Buddha knows how people's minds work. So he knows that, there are a lot of people who they recognize that the body is impermanent and unreliable. So then naturally they put their self-identity on their mind. But that's utterly ridiculous because actually of the two, our body is the more stable one. So it's absurd to place self-identity in either location, either in body or mind. Both are ridiculous. But actually the mind is even more ridiculous because it's so rapidly changing. There's another sutta where the Buddha says, it is difficult to give a simile for how quickly the mind changes. Nothing in the whole universe changes as rapidly as the mind.
And Jorgel asks, could you please offer some words on practicing with anxiety? Bante?
I could say a few things. First off, this is a very common question, so this comes up for many people. One thing which can help a lot, first off, is just becoming aware of the sensations within your body. So anxiety is usually accompanied by physical sensations. So start by practicing mindfulness of the body, being clearly aware of the sensations within your body, and developing a sense of contented awareness of those sensations. One of the things that can lead to anxiety spiraling out of control is that we start to get the physical symptoms of anxiety. And then that triggers this fear of like, oh no, I'm getting an anxiety attack. I don't want this. I want this to stop. But then that fear of the anxiety makes the anxiety stronger. But if you pay attention to your body and you just recognize, oh, it's just sensation. What kind of sensations? Maybe rapid, shallow breathing. Well, that's just breathing. It's just your body. Sometimes you have rapid, shallow breathing. Rapid heart rate. Well, again, that's just the body. If you're exercising, you'll have a rapid heart rate, but we don't think that's a problem. What does it feel like? Do you feel flushed? Does your body feel heated? Well, again, there's lots of things that can cause your body to feel heated. So, like, what is it? What are the actual sensations? And learning how to be aware of and content with the actual physical sensations. Then you can start looking at the mind. So what is the experience of anxiety within the mind? What are the conditions of mind that we identify as being related to anxiety? And you'll start to recognize that it's just thoughts and images and memories drifting through the mind, but that if we don't take them seriously, then they will not produce anxiety. So where we get anxiety is when we start believing and getting wrapped up in the thoughts and memories and ideas. So for example, you might start thinking about, tomorrow I need to give a speech to a group of people. I don't know if I'm ready. I'm not sure I can do this. And as you believe those thoughts and participate in those thoughts, then the anxiety builds and builds and builds. But if you just see the thought arising and you just recognize that the thought is just some meaningless noise, it's just the monkey jumping through the trees, and you're like, well, silly monkey, I'm not going to get involved with the silly monkey. I'm just going to let the silly monkey do its thing, but it's got nothing to do with me. So in the same way, you see the thought appearing in the mind, but because you're not taking it seriously and you're not getting involved with it, then it doesn't affect you. And it will dissipate sooner or later, usually sooner. If you don't participate in a thought, then it will tend to disappear fairly quickly. So these are some ways that you can practice with anxiety. Another thing which helps a lot with anxiety, by the way, is to recollect your own goodness. Start thinking about all the times you've been generous, all the times you've been kind. Think about your commitment to the precepts. And if you aren't committed to the precepts and you don't have any memories of generosity and kindness, well, then it's time to start following the precepts and practicing generosity and kindness. So you have something to think about. You have some goodness to remind yourself of. I still remember several years ago, we invited a senior monk to give a talk about anxiety. And actually, he spent the entire talk talking about the importance of practicing morality. And his point here was that if you have good morality, then you'll have a lot less anxiety in the first place. So his point was you don't need to worry about how to remove anxiety. You just need to create the conditions which prevent it from arising in the first place. And the most important condition for preventing anxiety is practicing morality. So practicing kindness and generosity. So those are a few thoughts on the topic of anxiety.
Thank you, Bante. I will, well, everything that Bante said, and I will just add a few other things that have helped me in the practice. And well, one of them is actually reflecting on this teaching of the Buddha when he speaks about Vedana, so feelings. And the Buddha says, as he describes basically our experience with feelings, when we experience pleasant feelings, we feel them attached. When we experience unpleasant feelings, we feel them attached. And when we experience neutral and unpleasant feelings, well, we feel them attached, or we are completely oblivious of them, and so we just keep on fueling our ignorance, which then fuels also the attachment to pretty much everything. But anyway, getting this into relation with anxiety, I was like, oh, okay, so how does this manifest? For example, why am I so attached actually to the unpleasant feeling of anxiety? And when you actually look deeply, it's because you're attached also to the pleasant feeling that comes from the outcome of what you're trying to achieve there. So, for example, right now, if I start thinking, I want Jorge to really like me based on my answer, I can already feel the anxiety coming up. What? The choice of words is not really that great. That my body starts tensing up a lot. What is Kumu going to think if I say something silly? Nobody is going to be watching this channel anymore. Right? Because actually, if Kumu and Jorge and whoever says, "Oh, Ayasoma, you're so great," there's pleasant feeling there that we attach. But then if we have the opposite of praise, if we have a lot of blame, that's unpleasant, and we feel it attached. We feel it like, oh, I wish it was in a different way. So what has helped me is actually embracing the worst possible scenario and being okay with it. So this I'm talking about in particular with public speaking. I was terrorized at the very beginning of Buddhist Insights, way before I actually had to give any type of Dhamma teaching, even to say hello to a group of people larger than 5. And with the microphone, it was terrorizing. Like asking a question, I remember when I first started going to listen to Dhamma talks, that in some Dhamma talks, they would pass, like if you had a question, they would pass you the microphone, and I would be full of anxiety, agitation. And that's because in that moment, even though if the majority of the people there, if not everybody, was a stranger, I still maybe I wanted to impress myself. I wanted to have the idea that I was going to ask an intelligent question. So then, of course, as soon as I had all that anxiety, I would ask the most stupid question, and or perhaps forget half of it as I was talking. And even right now, like my speaking English is not my first language, so the words don't come naturally. You just go, okay, yeah, that's fine. Now everybody watching this talk is going to think that Ayasoma is an idiot, and it's all right. It's okay. I'm not the first idiot nor the last who has walked on the face of the earth, and it's okay. Right? Like nobody is going to die if I'm going to say something silly. Like it's not a big deal. So we can drop it. And it's okay whether there is praise afterwards, if there's blame, if there is complete ignoring of us even existing in this world. Everything is okay, and we can hold it lightly. And you know why? Because there is no craving. There's no craving for wanting for something to be there. There's no craving for wanting for something not to be there. And so we stop creating the conditions for the anxiety to be there. So that was what I wanted to add. And then, we have quite a few questions. All right.
Yeah.
So RDL says, could you please give some wisdom on patience with a loved one experiencing a deep depression? Ante?
Yeah, so first off, recognize your own discomfort. So often the discomfort that we have in these cases is not so much compassion for the loved one as it is our own discomfort with being around somebody who's depressed. So the first thing is actually learning how to be completely okay with it. So being content with, this is how it is. My loved one is experiencing depression. That's okay. I can be here for them, even though they're depressed. then the next thing is to produce a genuine compassion. So really just wanting that person to be free of suffering, not for your own sake, but just because you really want that person to be happy and not to be depressed. Then you can start to see what you can do to help the person. But ultimately, you need to recognize that it's their choice what they do with their life. It's their choice what they do with their mind. You cannot remove their depression. They can do it, but you cannot do it for them. So it's very important that you cultivate equanimity because ultimately, you actually can't do anything at all. You can try. In fact, it's good to try. It's important to try. Do your best to help. But ultimately, the other person needs to resolve the issue within their own mind. So you can be there as an attentive, kind, and thoughtful companion. And you can work on your own discomfort with the situation. Learn how to be present with the depressed loved one without being disturbed or bothered. And with that clarity of mind, then you'll start to see what you can do to help. But you also need to come to peace with the fact that ultimately it's not in your control. Okay?
Great, thank you, Bante. And Kumu asks, Venerables, can you please explain how contact and craving are related in a reversible way? Contact is a condition for craving, is understood, but the opposite is not clear.
So the opposite in the Mahatanha Sankhya Sutta that you're referencing, the opposite is actually that craving is a condition for the four nutriments to arise. So there's two ways I understand that. One is that craving itself is independent of object. So we have this deep desire for some kind of pleasant experience. And then based upon that desire, we start looking for something pleasant to crave. So we have this sense of dissatisfaction and we want something pleasant. And then we think, well, what would be pleasant? Oh, those vanilla cookies in the pantry. That would be it. So then from craving, then there arises the thought of nourishment. So what is it that would nourish my craving? What is it that would give me that satisfaction that I think I want? So in this way, craving then can lead to us seeking out sensory experiences that we think will satisfy our craving. So that's how it works in the reverse order.
Sadhu, 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 that was great. And Shadow Label asks, if deep breathing can lessen the hormone that causes hunger, speaking from overeating to diet, is that mind over body where a thought overcomes body over mind? I'll still pass this on to you because I'm a little unclear.
I don't understand the question. Can you rephrase the question, please? I don't quite get what you're asking.
And so, yeah, if Shadow of Label, if you can retype, that would be great. And Pial asks, the initial links of dependent origination from ignorance up to sixth sense basis happens in the background without much control of us being mindful. From my understanding, the only control we have is what we can be aware of from the six senses, example, sensory restraints, etc., up to craving and clinging. Am I on the right track? Perhaps you can elaborate on this, Bante?
It's actually my understanding that you can break the chain at any point. So between any of the links, you can break the chain of dependent origination. So switching from the ignorance mode to the wisdom mode. It's just that certain links are easier than others. So a lot of attention is placed around the feeling, craving, clinging, existence links. So those four links there are a place where a lot of Buddhist practice is very relevant and very applicable. But actually, you can apply it between any two steps. So for example, at the stage of ignorance. So actively cultivating wisdom through studying the Buddhist teachings and trying to understand them on a deep level. Then you're actually aiming directly at the root problem, which is ignorance. From ignorance, there arises sankharas, formations. So actually, the practice of silent illumination breaks the chain right at that step. So that's one way that you can aim at something very close to the root. From sankharas arises consciousness. So this is where we create the sense of a separate self, a self which is separate from the objects that one is aware of. So you can break it at that point as well, by just recognizing objects are just objects. There's not a me that is seeing. There's not a me that is hearing. There's not a me that is conscious of other things, but rather objects are just objects. So in the same way, like, I have nowhere near enough time to do this right now, but I could go through and show how through Buddhist practice, you can actually get in between any two links and apply the Buddhist teachings and break the chain at that point. But yeah, the feeling, craving, clinging, existence, that's usually those four links. That's usually where we focus our practice, because that's where it's most obvious how to proceed.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bante. And Scott asks, any ideas for emergency mental situations where it is difficult to remember the Dhamma? Well, I would say that, first of all, that's why it's important to actually memorize certain passages of Dhamma, because then in emergency situations, you can recollect it. Or it can come, even if it's not an emergency situation, actually in just any situation, you can recollect the teachings. And the more you do that, the more you contemplate the teachings. And this is in everyday life. You don't have to go on a meditation retreat. You don't have to even do sitting meditation, but you can be washing the dishes and contemplating the Dhamma, reflecting on the Dhamma, like what does it mean in my life? And then your mind naturally has that tendency towards investigation. And,
sorry. Go ahead.
I lost my train of thought. So maybe actually, if you want to keep going, because I don't remember now anymore. It's all right.
Sorry.
No big deal.
Yeah, so in emergency situations, the mind tends to revert to its deep habits. So build up a deep habit of thinking about the Dhamma. So as Ayasoma was saying, think about the Dhamma all the time, no matter where you are, what you're doing. And try not to do things that make you think about non-Dhamma. So if you spend 6 hours a day watching violent TV shows and then 20 minutes a day reading suttas, what do you think your mind is going to do in emergency situations? It's going to fall back to that 6 hours of conditioning, not towards the 20 minutes of conditioning. So try to condition your mind all day long to think about Dhamma, and try to not do anything which will condition your mind to stray towards non-Dhamma or anti-Dhamma. And in this way, then your mind will always point towards Dhamma, even in emergency situations.
Right. Thank you, Bante. Shadow of Label says, using a thought to breathe deeply to lessen the hormone that causes hunger, which cause impulses to eat more. When a thought controls hormones, is that an example of mind over body?
Yeah.
Okay. That was easy. And Kumu says, was reading an article in Psychology Today, and it mentioned that anxiety is more pervasive and is present in a person as a continuous state, while nervousness is more directly for specific events. I would say that actually that's what the Buddha pretty much says. Let's see if I can use the right English wording, but whatever you introduce in your mind, that will be the direction of your mind. So fundamentally, like whether you want to call it nervousness or anxiety in one moment, that will be, if you keep on creating the conditions for that to surface in the mind, then that will be your tendency. And then it can become actually a sort of chronic state of existence. So it's no different than actually if you think of the body, whatever you do with the body. You know, if tomorrow I start, how do you say, like going like this with the leg, like not walking properly, like zoppicare, limping. Yeah, then my body will start then naturally limping, and it won't be able to walk without limping. That was very much what my mom used to tell me all the time when I was growing up, to pay very much attention to how I was putting my legs in one way or the other, because that would be then the direction that my feet, for example, would go. or my legs would go. So it's the same thing. If you train your mind to be an anxious mind, then that is the direction where your mind is going to be, and it's going to, like feel like it's the inherent quality of the mind because it's such an ingrained habit. So it will be more difficult to reverse it, but it's still possible. Once again, it's dependently arisen. So you put causes and conditions to create that result. So now we can use the teachings of the Buddha to put other causes and conditions. You cannot control the causes. You cannot control the consequences, but you can control the causes.
Okay. And we should wrap up.
And Shadow Label says, do you guys take Bitcoin donations? Well, we don't handle money personally, either Bitcoin or coin, but there are monastery stewards who do. So if your question is, do the monastery stewards handle Bitcoins? Well, you can send an email to info@emptycloud.org, and it will be forwarded to the people who take care of them, of that department. Okay, last question, Bhante, for you from PL. Is ignorance mainly fed by taints, triggering point of ignorance independent origination, as they may be interdependent, fueling each other? The explanation of Samadhi Sutta by Venerable Sariputta end up in taints after ignorance may suggest this connection. What is your take on it?
Well, there's a few suttas where the Buddha gives a link prior to ignorance, and they're different in different suttas. And ignorance itself is one of the asavas, so avijja asava is one of the asavas. So avijja itself is one of the taints. Itself is one of the asavas, and it's actually the asava from which the other asavas arise. So putting the asavas as being prior to ignorance it's a way of speaking. But you can also say that avijja, as the starting point, is itself already representative of the asavas. But yeah, there's many different suttas where the Buddha gives something prior to the first step of dependent origination. So I would have to talk about each of those cases individually, and that's more time than we have. So perhaps another time we can do that.
Well, next month I was planning on doing a special on the asavas, so this could be actually quite great. All right, so we can end the evening with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. New York City time for another sutta study, this time with Venerable Vimalanyani. Our bhikkhuni who is spending the Vasa here. And then in the evening, any questions that you have not on dependent origination, you can bring for monk chat. And then next week, once again, remember Wednesday evening, Ajahn Punadhammo will be sharing teachings on dependent origination again. All right, may you all be well and happy, and may all good things come to you.